Ever wondered how they hire technical talent at the BBC? Hi, this is Gary. Welcome to Development That Pays. I was lucky enough to spend 2 years at BBC Worldwide, long enough to see a fair number of people go through the Technical Recruitment Funnel. And of course, I went through it once myself. Now, I'm no expert in the area of recruitment, but it does seem to me that the process does a good job of balancing efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency in minimising the workload required by each side, effectiveness in getting the right person for the job. The first two steps are fairly standard. Candidates are required from various sources, then filtered down. Next is the phone tech 5, more on that in a moment. The remaining candidates are then invited in for what will be, for most of them, a two-step process. First a face-to-face interview, followed by the coding 45. I'll get into detail on that in a minute or two. Then the offer, and with a bit of luck, the acceptance. To give you an idea of rough numbers, 100 or more names might be fed in at the top, filter down to a dozen or so for the phone tech 5. 5 of those would be invited in for a face-to-face interview, and maybe 3 of those would go on to do the coding 45. Then 1 would be offered the role. Let's put a little bit of detail onto the strangely named items in the process, starting with the phone tech 5. Here's how it works. The lead developer gets on the phone and goes through a list of 5 technical questions with the candidate. By the end of the call, which typically lasts less than 10 minutes, each side is better informed. The lead dev has some feeling for the candidate's technical level, enough to decide whether to bring her in for interview, and the candidate has a better idea of the technical areas that are key to the role. For the phone tech 5 to work well, the questions should reflect the technical areas required by the role and require responses that are more than one word, but a little bit less than War and Peace. Moving on to the coding 45. This is one that I can talk about with some authority. I ran a fair few of these during my time at the Beeb. Coding 45 is a time-limited, 45-minute pair programming test. I'd set it up by saying that I'd be playing the role of an indecisive product owner. I'd be asking for something, then asking for something to be modified, and I'll probably be doing that rather a lot. The keys to success are starting with something very, very easy, then increasing the level of difficulty one step at a time, getting the person to talk about their coding decisions, and providing help and assistance as appropriate. After all, it's an exercise. It's not supposed to be a torture session. There's another key, something that I stumbled on completely by accident. The very first time I ran a coding 45, I made a mess of booking a conference room. I had no choice but to run the session at my workstation. When the session was over, I realised that I'd been concentrating so hard on running the process that I hadn't formed an opinion of whether or not to hire this person. I was still wrestling with the thought when I passed a colleague in the corridor. "Well, that seemed like hard work," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The guy you just had in, bit like pulling teeth, wasn't it?" How interesting. I hadn't been able to form an opinion, but those around me had formed an opinion easily. From that point, we made it a requirement to run the coding 45 at our desks and to make sure to gather feedback from the entire team at the end. If you'd like a copy of the funnel, which includes example questions for the phone tech 5 and the coding 45, you'll find a downloadable version on the Development That Pays website. Talk to you next time.